Stop scrolling. This could be worth thousands of dollars in your pocket. The IRS just made a massive announcement that millions of Americans have been desperately waiting for, and if you qualify, your stimulus check could hit your bank account within days. Yes, you heard that right, this week. After months of delays, confusion, and endless questions about when this money would finally arrive, the IRS has officially confirmed the payment schedule. But here's the thing. Not everyone who's expecting money will actually get it, and timing varies dramatically depending on several key factors that most people don't even know about. We're talking about payments that could range from hundreds to several $1,000s, and if you're not aware of the specific eligibility requirements or the exact dates these checks are being sent out, you could be caught completely off guard. Some people will see direct deposits hitting their accounts as early as tomorrow, while others might be waiting for paper checks that could take weeks longer. In this video, I'm breaking down everything you need to know. Who qualifies, exactly when your payment is scheduled to arrive, what to do if you haven't received it, and the critical mistakes that could delay or even disqualify you from getting this money. This is time-sensitive information that could literally change your financial situation this month. So smash that like button right now if you want your stimulus money. Let's get into the details. All right, so let's dive right into what's actually happening here because there's been so much confusion and misinformation floating around about these payments, and I want to make absolutely sure you have the clearest, most accurate information possible. The IRS has finally broken their silence on what many Americans have been calling the most anticipated financial relief of the year, and the confirmation came through official channels just recently. This isn't speculation or rumor, this is direct from the Internal Revenue Service, and it affects millions of households across the country. Now, before we go any further, I need to address something really important. When we're talking about stimulus checks arriving this week, we're specifically referring to payments that have been part of ongoing federal relief programs, and there are actually several different types of payments that could be landing in people's accounts. Some of these are recovery rebate credits that people claimed on their tax returns but haven't received yet. Others are supplemental payments for individuals who didn't receive the full amount they were entitled to during previous stimulus rounds. And then there's a category of payments going to people who recently became eligible due to changes in their filing status, income, or dependent situation. The reason this has taken so long is actually more complicated than most people realize. The IRS has been dealing with an absolutely unprecedented backlog of tax returns, amended returns, and verification processes. They've been working through literally millions of cases where there were discrepancies between what people claimed and what the IRS had on file. On top of that, there have been legislative changes and updates to eligibility criteria that required the agency to go back and recalculate payments for certain groups of people. It's been a massive administrative challenge, and while I know the delays have been incredibly frustrating for people who are counting on this money, understanding why it took so long actually helps us understand who's getting paid now and in what order. So let's talk about the actual timeline because this is where things get really specific and really important for you personally. The IRS has stated that direct deposits will begin processing this week, with the first wave hitting bank accounts as early as Wednesday for some recipients. Now, that Wednesday date is crucial because it represents when the payments are actually transmitted to financial institutions, but depending on your specific bank's processing schedule, you might see the money available in your account anywhere from Wednesday morning to Friday afternoon. Different banks have different posting schedules, and some are faster than others when it comes to making federal deposits available to customers. For those of you who are receiving paper checks in the mail, the timeline is going to be a bit longer. The IRS is printing and mailing these checks throughout the week, but you need to understand that once a check leaves the IRS facility, it's in the hands of the Postal Service. Based on historical patterns and what we've seen with previous stimulus distributions, paper checks typically take anywhere from 7 to 14 days to arrive after they've been mailed. So if your check is printed and sent out this Friday, you're realistically looking at receiving it sometime between next week and the week after that. I know that's not the instant gratification people want to hear, but it's the reality of how the system works. Now here's where things get really interesting and where you need to pay close attention. The order in which payments are being sent out is not random. The IRS is prioritizing based on several factors, and understanding these factors can help you estimate when you're most likely to receive your payment. First priority is going to people who have direct deposit information already on file with the IRS from their most recent tax return. If you filed your 2024 taxes and included your bank account information, or if the IRS already has your banking details from previous years, you're in the first group. This makes sense from an efficiency standpoint because electronic transfers are faster, cheaper, and more reliable than mailing physical checks. The second priority group includes people who recently updated their information through the IRS website or who filed amended returns that have been fully processed. This is a slightly smaller group, but it's significant because it includes a lot of folks who had errors on their original returns or who qualified for additional credits they didn't initially claim. If you filed an amended return specifically to claim a recovery rebate credit that you missed, and that amendment has been processed and accepted, you should be in this second wave of payments. The third group, which unfortunately is going to experience the longest wait times, includes people who don't have direct deposit set up, people whose banking information has changed and hasn't been updated with the IRS, and people who are receiving their first payment from the IRS for any reason. If you've moved recently and didn't update your address, or if you switched banks and the IRS still has your old account information, this could affect you. The IRS will attempt a direct deposit first if they have any banking information on file, but if that deposit fails or bounces back, they'll automatically switch to mailing a paper check to the address they have on file. Let me talk about the amounts people can expect because this varies tremendously based on individual circumstances. For some people, we're talking about relatively small amounts, maybe a couple $100s representing the difference between what they received in previous stimulus rounds and what they were actually entitled to. For others, particularly those who had significant life changes like getting married, having a baby, or claiming new dependents, we could be talking about several $1,000s. The calculations are based on your adjusted gross income, your filing status, and the number of qualifying dependents you claimed on your most recent tax return. One of the most common questions I've been seeing is from people who aren't sure whether they even qualify for a payment. Let me walk you through the basic eligibility framework. If you filed a tax return for 2023 or 2024 and your income was below certain thresholds, and if you were a U.S. citizen or resident alien for the full year, you're potentially eligible. The income thresholds vary depending on your filing status. For single filers, the phase-out generally begins around $75,000 of adjusted gross income. For head of household filers, it starts around $112,500. And for married couples filing jointly, it begins around $150,000. But here's something really important that a lot of people miss. Even if your income was above these thresholds, you might still qualify for a partial payment. And the calculation of that partial payment depends on specific formulas that take into account not just your income, but also your eligible dependents. Each qualifying child can add a significant amount to your payment, and the definition of a qualifying child includes factors like age, relationship to you, and whether they lived with you for more than half the year. This is where things can get complicated, and it's why so many people have been waiting for the IRS to sort through their cases individually. There's also a group of people who might be eligible but don't even realize it yet. If you don't normally file taxes because your income is below the filing threshold, you might have missed out on previous stimulus payments simply because the IRS didn't have information about you in their system. The good news is that it's not too late. You can still file what's called a simplified return specifically to claim recovery rebate credits, and if you do this, you could receive payment for not just this round but potentially for previous rounds you missed as well. The deadline for claiming these credits is typically 3 years from the original due date of the return, so there's still time, but you don't want to wait too long. Now let's address what you should do if you believe you're eligible but you don't receive a payment this week or in the coming weeks. The first step is to not panic. Payment processing happens in waves, and just because you didn't get your money in the first batch doesn't mean there's a problem. The IRS will continue sending out payments over the next several weeks as they work through their queue. However, if it's been more than 4 weeks since the IRS announced payments were going out and you still haven't received anything, that's when you want to take action. The IRS has a specific tool on their website called the Get My Payment portal, and this should be your first stop. This tool allows you to check the status of your payment, see whether it's been processed, and find out whether it was sent via direct deposit or mailed as a check. You'll need some basic information to access the tool, including your Social Security number, your date of birth, and your address as it appears on your most recent tax return. The system will tell you the date your payment was issued and the method by which it was sent. If the portal shows that your payment was sent but you never received it, you have options. For direct deposits that failed or went to a closed account, the money typically gets returned to the IRS and they'll reissue it as a paper check. For paper checks that were lost in the mail or stolen, you can request a payment trace, which is essentially an investigation into what happened to your check. This process can take several weeks, but it's important to initiate it if you believe your payment went missing. Something else that's critically important to understand is the tax implications of these payments. The good news is that stimulus payments are not considered taxable income, so you don't need to report them on your tax return as income, and they won't affect your tax bracket or increase your tax liability. However, there is a connection between stimulus payments and your tax return through the recovery rebate credit. If you were eligible for a stimulus payment but didn't receive it, you can claim it as a credit on your tax return, which will either increase your refund or decrease the amount you owe. This is actually how some people are just now receiving payments. They claimed the credit on their 2024 return, and the IRS is now processing those claims and sending out the money. Let me also address some common mistakes that people make that can delay or complicate their payments. One of the biggest mistakes is providing incorrect banking information. If you enter your bank account number or routing number wrong when filing your taxes, the IRS will attempt to deposit your money into that incorrect account. If the account doesn't exist, the deposit will bounce back and the IRS will eventually mail a check, but this adds weeks to the process. Another common mistake is not updating your address when you move. If the IRS sends a check to your old address and you didn't set up mail forwarding, that check could end up lost or returned to sender. There's also confusion around dependents and who can claim them. If you're divorced or separated and share custody of children, only one parent can claim each child as a dependent in any given tax year. If both parents try to claim the same child, it triggers an IRS review that can delay processing of both returns and any associated payments. Make sure you and your co-parent have a clear agreement about who claims which children each year. As we wrap up here, I want to make sure you know exactly what steps to take right now. First, check your bank account regularly over the next few days if you have direct deposit set up. Second, monitor your mailbox carefully if you're expecting a paper check. Third, use the IRS Get My Payment tool to check your status if you're uncertain. Fourth, make sure all your information with the IRS is current and correct. And fifth, If you haven't filed your taxes yet, or if you need to file an amended return to claim credits you're entitled to, don't delay. Get that done as soon as possible because these deadlines matter, and the sooner you file, the sooner you'll receive any money you're owed. This is real money that can make a real difference in your life. So stay informed and stay proactive.